Welcome to the Creative Me podcast, coming to you from Guernsey in the Channel Islands. This is episode 37. Not enough hours in the day? Listen to this. Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Creative Me podcast. Today's episode is inspired by a few things, really. This week I took part in my first webinar, and when I say took part, I mean I co-hosted the webinar with the lovely Frank Degenard, who I have interviewed on the Creative Me podcast before. If you'd like to listen to my interview with Frank, check out martinellis.com/18. The experience of doing the webinar and subsequent chats in the Lightbulb Club afterwards highlighted a general feeling amongst busy people, and that feeling was, there's not enough hours in the day. How many times have you said that before? I have said it so many times, and I really got thinking about the statement, there's not enough hours in the day. Well, we all have the same 24 hours. What's different is that we have different commitments that we have to attend to. So you might have a family, you might have other very time-consuming commitments that you have to get on with. But what's left over, that's the time that you get to spend on perhaps your business or your creative pursuits or whatever it is you do. So the question is, how can we maximise that time and make the very, very best use of it? Also, I think one of the biggest problems is that we are setting ourselves up to fail. If when all of your tasks that you've completed, such as your family stuff and feeding people and cleaning people, including yourself, once all of that's done, when you look at the time you've got left over, are you setting yourself like 12 to-do items? Are you being realistic about the time that you've got to do these tasks? I think probably not. I think what a lot of us do is we have a massive list of to-dos and we just have not properly looked at how long each to-do is going to take, and there is a distinct mismatch between what we're expecting of ourselves and the time that we've got available. So we're not being realistic. Something I mentioned in the Lightbulb Club when I was giving some thought to this topic for a podcast is that when we are planning how to use our time that we've got, when we set our tasks to do, we should try to be specific and realistic. Those are my two favourite words when it comes to setting tasks. So specific, you have to really clearly identify what needs to be done and estimate as closely as you can how long it's going to take. So you have to be specific when you identify the tasks and the time. Then you need to be realistic in terms of how much time you've got to complete the tasks. If you're giving yourself 10 tasks that take an hour each and you've got 2 hours to do this work, then it's just not going to happen. So you're not being realistic. So I guess my first top tip to you is, when you are writing a list of things to do, be specific about what you've got to do and make sure that you're being realistic. Those are two really, really important words. Realistic. Chances are, rather than having 10 things on your to-do list for the day, you'll probably have 2 or 3. And that's great. Those are your most important tasks, or your MITs. I always operate on an MIT basis. I have a trusted place where I dump everything that I need to do at some point. That's very much David Allen getting things done strategy. Have a trusted place to dump all your ideas and thoughts and things to do. But when it comes to what I'm going to do today, I pick my 3 most important tasks, assuming that those 3 tasks are specific and realistic. I pop them on the whiteboard and I gradually work through them and I tick them off when they're done. And there is something to be said for ticking off a to-do list item, isn't there? I'm mostly digital, but I do like having a whiteboard, or in the absence of a whiteboard, a piece of paper on the wall or a couple of post-it notes, something like that. So that's how I like to operate. I choose my most important tasks, and those are the ones I schedule for the day. And then, of course, there's scheduling. If you really want to maximise the time that you've got available, you should schedule pretty much every second of that time if you can. You might find, and I've mentioned it before, the Pomodoro technique is useful for helping you to chunk up that time. But really the principle I'm trying to get across is planning your day rigorously to make sure you get your most important tasks done. Really, the key message here is to stop being so hard on yourself and asking impossible tasks of yourself. There's a couple of other things that I think it's worth giving a gentle reminder of in terms of maximising the time you've got available. The first thing is, it's a bit unpleasant, I guess, but rise and shine bright and early. If you can manage to get a really decent night's sleep, incidentally, that's the second top tip I was going to give you, make sure you maximise your sleep time. But if you can get a good night's sleep, get up bright and early before anything is going on in your household and reclaim an extra hour of your day. There's nothing like being up at 6 a.m. and cracking on with some work and feeling like you've done something really valuable before anyone in the house is even up. That top tip relies on going to bed at a decent time and getting a really good night's sleep. The other thing I was going to mention in this episode, and it is something that I've mentioned before, but I do think it's really valuable and worth repeating, and that is don't multitask. There is no such thing as multitasking. If you are multitasking, you are actually doing something called task switching, and it is the most inefficient way you can work, because you're not giving one thing your full concentration. You are splitting your concentration between things, and essentially what happens is you're working on one thing and then you switch to another, and the time it takes to switch your focus is huge, so you're wasting time. Multitasking is an absolute no-no. It's not big and it's not clever. Incidentally, I wrote about multitasking in my free ebook, The Quick and Dirty Guide to Getting Stuff Done. I'll make sure there's a button for you in the show notes so you can download the ebook and have a little read. Again, you'll find the show notes at martinellis.com/37. The final thing that I'd really like to leave you with, and this is also a biggie, and that is learning to say no. I'll be honest, full disclosure here, I am rubbish at saying no to stuff. And of course, I genuinely appreciate there are things that it's impossible to say no to. You can't say no to your feeding your family, for example. I get that completely. Even though, to be fair, I only have a dog to think about and a husband. But I do get that there are things you can't say no to. But equally, there are things you can say no to. And learning to say no it's a huge, huge thing. And I really encourage you to think about it and work on this particular skill. Those are my thoughts, but more importantly, what do you think? Are you too hard on yourself? Do you set unrealistic expectations of your time? I secretly suspect that you do, but I'd really like to know your take on this. I'd also be very interested to hear about the productivity strategies you use. Do you operate in a similar way to me with your most important tasks? Do you use something else to prioritise the work that you do? Perhaps you like the Eisenhower matrix. That's one that I've used before. Or one that Frank mentioned in the webinar was the 135 method. I'll make sure that I link to these methods so you can understand a bit more about them in the show notes. Incidentally, you'll find the show notes at martinellis.com/37. Do let me know what you think, though. I'd be very, very interested to hear from you. Hop over to martinellis.com and you can pick up all of my social media links there, as well as making contact with me via email or the contact form on my website. Just let me know what you think. It'd be so good to hear from you. Okay, that's today's episode done and dusted. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you'll join me next week.